How's it going, everyone? Now, I have just seen Avengers Endgame for a second time. And since I've seen it a second time, I did a lot of analyzing the movie, and I tried to pay extra close attention to the time travel stuff and just all the details and all the questions I had from the first viewing. I wanted to see if I could find some sort of answer the second go around. So obviously this video has a lot of spoilers in it, so if you do not want to be spoiled, turn away from the video. Now the time travel in this movie it's like their own unique take on it. It's kind of confusing, and a lot of people are getting it mixed up with other time travel movies, and they even make a point in this movie that it's nothing like Back to the Future. A lot of people have it in their brains that time travel works like Back to the Future. I've talked to friends that have seen the movie. I talked to my parents, and everybody, when they think about this, they're like, oh, if you change something in the past, it'll change the future. That's not how it works in this movie. So, for example, let's say they go back in time and they killed Thanos. That doesn't affect their present timeline. Like, if they go back to 2010 and they killed Thanos, that doesn't mean Thanos is dead in 2023, which is the year that they're in. That just means that 2010 timeline, it splits off, it goes into its own separate universe. Imagine it that way. Like, it branches off into its own tree. That 2010 is a new timeline now because that 2010 does not have Thanos. That does not change the 2023 that they came from. So anytime they go back in time and they change something, it branches it off into its own timeline. So if they screw something up, that just creates another timeline. It doesn't affect their timeline, which is where things get tricky. So the reason at the end of the movie, when Captain America takes all the Infinity Stones to their respective timelines, they don't want to screw up and create branches. That's why when Bruce Banner was talking to the Ancient One, the bald-headed lady who's the keeper of the time stone from Doctor Strange, when he was talking to her, she had a pretty good explanation of it. Like, if you screw something up or if you change something, it branches off into its own thing. Well, he made the promise that he was going to return all the stones. So, thus, when they returned the stones, it fixed all the timelines, and then it basically reset everything back to normal. So my theory is, because there's been a lot of people talking about Captain America. Like, if you can't change the past, how is it that Captain America can exist in 2023 as an old man? Like, how did he do it? How does this happen? If you can't go back in time and alter the past and affect the present, how does this work? So my theory, which this is just up for speculation, because, there's no definitive answer to this. Now, there might be something different in the comic books, but I'm going just based off of the movie alone, because the movies have their own take on everything, and they don't follow the comic books exactly to the T. So this is what I think is what happened. I think there's been two Captain Americas this entire time. I think when Captain America went back to the past and decided to stay with Peggy, it created a time loop, and it will just go on for all eternity. So look at it this way. Captain America, at the end of the Captain America movie, he was frozen, obviously. He crash-landed the ship, and then he landed in the ice, and he was frozen. That happened in 1945. Well, after the events of Endgame, Captain America went back in time, and then he realized, well, I want to live out my life, and I want to catch up on the things that I missed out on. I have time travel. I'm going to go meet the love of my life and live happily ever after. Well, this is where two Captain Americas come into play. He went back to probably around let's say it's 1945. He went back to 1945 when he was frozen, okay? He met up with Peggy. Well, that Captain America that's frozen is still there because that's his timeline. So they coexist with each other. So we have the present Captain America, the one from 2023. He's in 1945, and then the other version of him from 1945 is still frozen. So Captain America, the present one, lives out his life during the same time gap that he's frozen, all the way up until Captain America is unfrozen. So we have our Captain America just living his life, he got married, he's enjoying everything, but he knows how everything's going to take place. He knows the events, he knows what's going to happen. He just doesn't get involved. He just sits back. He knows that the frozen Captain America, the one from 1945, is going to fight all these fights. He's going to help the Avengers. He's going to do all the events of Civil War. He's going to get involved with Thanos. Meanwhile, the Captain America from 2023 is just sitting back, probably, presumably with his family. Just, he knows the outcome. There's no reason for him to get involved. He doesn't have to. It would screw something up. Everything needs to happen the way that it does. Otherwise, it won't happen. So he's probably sitting back, watching the events take place. He's watching everything happen in New York with the Avengers. He's watching the events of Ultron because he knows the outcome. He doesn't have to worry about it because he knows everything will happen in the end. Now, yes, I'm sure he could help out in some way if he wanted to. Maybe he could save some civilians or something. Like while the city's getting attacked, he might be able to save a few people. But keep in mind, he's probably pretty old at this point. Now, I would assume that he has some slow aging because at this point he would be in his 120s or something. So let's just assume that the super soldier serum just slows down your aging for this scenario. And yeah, all the events take place. It gets up to the point where we're at now. He's an old man. So he shows up to the lake, sits down on the bench, and just waits. Meanwhile, the other version of him gets onto the machine. They send him back in time, and he does his thing, thus creating the loop. And then they obviously see him sitting on the bench, and then he lives out the rest of his life until he presumably dies of old age. And yeah, that's basically how I think it worked. I just think there's been 2 Captain Americas this entire time, and it will just endlessly play out that cycle forever. It's just Captain America lives out his life. The events of Endgame happen. He goes back in time, lives his entire life again, and then it just repeats over and over and over. So I think this entire time throughout the span of all these movies, there has been 2 Captain Americas. One has been living in secret, just sitting back and watching the events take place because he already lived them. Meanwhile, the other is what we see happen on screen. But that is just a theory. That's what I think happened. And that at least makes sense to me and helps me understand how Captain America can be there. There's so many different ways you could look at this time travel stuff because there's a lot of plot holes and different questions you can ask. For example, I don't know how the hell he returned the Soul Stone. It still doesn't make sense to me. What's he show up and he's just like, hey, Red Skull, I don't need this anymore. So I would like to see that interaction between the 2 of them. So I don't know how he did that. Where's Loki, for example? So there's still a lot of time travel questions that need to be answered. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Do you think this is plausible? Is there a completely different theory? What do you guys think? How is Captain America there? What do you think of time travel in general? I know it's a pretty crazy topic to think about. But yeah, if you guys agree or disagree, you can either leave a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Check out another video, and that's going to do it for me, and I will talk to you guys later.